Mega Evolutions are some of the strongest Pokemon ever made, but I want to know if they're strong enough to beat the hardest Romhack I've ever played as a Hardcore Nuzlocke challenge, meaning if any of my Megas should faint, they'll have to be boxed forever. Professor Birch gives us the choice of any starter from all generations, but we're of course limited to picking between the Gen 1 starters, Gen 3, and Gen 4 since they've been given Mega Evolutions in this game. Grass has by far the best matchup versus the first 3 gyms, so I pick up Turtwig, who with his self-sufficient ability basically has built-in leftovers, one of the best items in the game, especially for a bulky boy like our Blastoise here. With it, it's super easy to stay healthy versus our rival May, so that we don't awkwardly lose the first fight of the game. Now obviously, I'm only allowed to catch and use Pokemon that can Mega Evolve once they fully evolve, but just like any regular Nuzlocke, I'm also only allowed to catch the first eligible encounter I find per route. And to play optimally, we want to immediately repel through Route 101 to delay our possible encounter of Pidgey, Blipbug, Choodle, or Roly-Coly. I do this since we can get a guaranteed Pidgey in Rustboro City to make sure we get one of the other 3 when we circle back to Route 101. Route 103 doesn't have any Mega Evolvable encounters, but empty routes like this are perfect in the future for things like hatching eggs. Route 102, on the other hand, has one single Mega Evolvable Pokemon we can catch, Ralts, which I'm able to catch playing on this video's sponsor, Red Magic, a series of smartphones dedicated to providing players the ultimate gaming experience. And they've just released their newest model, the Red Magic 10 Air, which is basically a gaming PC you can easily fit in your pocket. With a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 processor and built-in cooling system, along with up to 16 gigabytes of RAM, gaming is an absolute seamless pleasure. I tried my very best to get a single lag spike by spamming as many laggy towers as possible in Bloons TD6, but instead ended up having a buttery smooth great time. The 10 Air has the same 6.8-inch screen as previous models, while being both slimmer, lighter, and best of all, coming in at an amazing, more affordable price for the crazy gaming specs. So if you're interested in gaming on the go, I highly recommend the Red Magic 10 Air with what's in my opinion the slickest design so far. So check out the pinned comment below or link down in the description to pick yours up today, and let's get back to catching Pokemon. Once we reach Petalburg City, we can talk to this fisherman who gives us his old rod. By fishing here in Petalburg, we can guarantee one of the best encounters in the entire game, Slowpoke. Regenerator is just an insane ability on a super bulky Pokemon. On Route 104, we can either guarantee to pick up Krabby in the grass or grab Magikarp in the water. And while Krabby would be an excellent encounter against Roxanne, we're basically screwed against Brawly unless we pick up Gyarados. Moving on through Petalburg Woods, we can either pick up Weedle or Caterpie, since Emerald Imperium has turned every Gigantamax form into a Mega, just like in Radical Red. I end up getting Weedle, but either of the two is a fantastic pickup and can easily sweep through the grunt that we've got to face later in the woods. Once in Rustboro, we can find this added patch of grass where we're guaranteed to pick up Pidgey. Immediately afterwards, I head back to Route 101, where I'm hoping to get either Roly-Coly or Choodle, but even Blipbug would have been great here with its quad resistance against Brawly. Finally, we can pick up one more encounter before Roxanne on Route 116 to replace our useless Magikarp. Admittedly, the 1% possibility that we get an Abra here would be just as useless as Magikarp. Thankfully, we run into the much more common and only other encounter on the route, Badoo. The only downside being that I've got to run back and forth Rustboro for about half an hour to raise Badoo's friendship enough to evolve it into Roselia. The gym battles and evil team encounters in Emerald Imperium are absolutely brutal, and Roxanne is no different. She's got 4 Pokemon, leading with a Rhyhorn holding a Rindo Berry. This reduces the damage it takes from grass-type moves, but between its quad weakness and my Miracle Seed, it's still an easy one-hit KO. Gligar's the real threat. With Stab super effective moves against 5 out of my 6 Pokemon, I needed to come up with a strategy to weaken it. First, I pivot through Roly-Coly to send in Pidgey on a Bulldoze. With an impish nature, my Pidgey takes just over half from a wing attack, and I can heal up a bit from an Oranberry, then weaken Gligar's attack with a Feather Dance. This causes Roxanne to swap into Nosepass, which isn't great in the sense that we still have to deal with Gligar later, but at least I get to send in Slowpoke for free. The plan here is to get Nosepass paralyzed, whether it succeeds in paralyzing us first or not. I thankfully don't get paralyzed and get a completely free hit as Nosepass gets fully paralyzed the next turn. My second Water Pulse fails to get the KO and basically gets completely nullified by a Berry Juice, but at least we get another full para. The good thing about paralyzing Nosepass is it starts going for speed controlling moves like Bulldoze. It doesn't actually realize that Spark has the chance to paralyze, and we're able to pick up the KO without too much trouble. With enough health left to survive a crit Bulldoze, I decide to leave Slowpoke in and go for a Yawn. Normally, this would be a great plan, causing Roxanne to switch to not fall asleep, completely missing that she of course won't switch if she sees KO. There were non-crit rolls that could have killed me there. With Gligar guaranteed to sleep for a turn, I go for Mega Drain to get some health back, taking it below half, which immediately gets healed back up by an Oran Berry. I make a risky play here, calling a second turn of sleep to take Gligar into the red with another Mega Drain. I don't quite have the stomach for risking another turn, so I swap out into Roly-Coly, which massively pays off since Gligar wakes up. Now baiting Bulldoze, I can once again swap in Pidgey for free, who always survives any non-crit wing attack roll because of that Oran Berry, and once again lower Gligar's attack with a Feather Dance. I then pivot through Roly-Coly again to switch Turtwig in on a resisted Bulldoze to theoretically set myself up for a Razor Leaf KO the following turn, but Roxanne decides to swap out, sending in her final Pokemon Wooper. Thankfully, we can just one-shot this thing with a Mega Drain from Roselia. The only problem being that we still need to deal with Gligar, and we can't lower its attack with Feather Dance this time. Gligar comes back in, so I swap into Roly-Coly to guarantee we get hit by a Bulldoze when we swap into Blastoise. With the rest of my team all in one-shot range, this is my only play. After end of turn recovery, as long as Gligar doesn't crit, we're able to just barely survive. There are plenty of moments in this fight that could have gone incredibly wrong, but somehow I managed to make it through the first split of the game without losing any Pokemon. Going into the second split, the level cap increases by a lot, allowing us to evolve half of our team, most notably Magikarp into Gyarados. We then head to Rusturf Tunnel to help poor old Mr. Briny get his Pico back. We're able to pick up Mareep or Duskull here, but the most common encounter by far is getting Ghastly. Getting one of the two ghost types here is definitely preferred, so we have an immunity against Brawly's fighting moves. Beedrill gets to do what he does best and take care of the Aqua Grunt before Mr. Briny takes us to Dewford Town. And Granite Cave is a gold mine for the average Mega Evolution enjoyer. On the first basement floor, we could get Auron, Meditite, or Sableye. If we repel all the way to Steven's room, we could even guarantee to get Beldum. Instead, I decide to go for basement level 2, where we're guaranteed to get Mawile. Fairy Steel is the best typing in the game with 2 immunities, and we get Intimidate on top of that. It's just too good to pass up on. I also make sure to give Steven the letter before the gym fight so we can get access to citrus berries, berry juice, and a ton of other useful items. Brawly ramps up the difficulty by a lot compared to the first gym. His starting Pikachu Libre, however, is no match for Beedrill. Even after a Fake Out and Electroweb, a second Electroweb couldn't take Beedrill out with a crit. If something crazy like getting crit by both Fake Out and Electroweb were to happen, I made sure to give Beedrill a Berry Juice just to heal up some HP. Yes, triple crit would have been game over for Beedrill, but there's only so prepared you can be. Brawly sends in his Eviolite Iron Fist Girder, which is one of the things I'm the most scared of on his team. I do a bit of switching back and forth between my Intimidators to lower Girder's attack, which eventually causes Brawly to switch. It ends up costing me quite a bit of Mawile's HP, but when I swap it in against Sandslash to get an Intimidate drop, the Aerial Ace on the switch brings me low enough to activate my Berry Juice. Mawile baits Bulldoze so I can swap in my Levitating Ghost for free and outspeed with a Will-O-Wisp the next turn to make Sandslash useless for the rest of the fight. Instead of allowing me to put Sandslash out of its misery, Brawly decides to prolong its suffering by swapping out into Girder as I go for Bulldoze. I start by pivoting between my Intimidators, and once I've got its attack low enough, I send in Haunter against a low sweep. My plan here was to burn Girder, but instead Brawly swaps into Lycanroc, which works out perfectly for me since I'm even more afraid of this thing than Girder. With Tough Claws, my favorite rock type can output some serious damage, but that burn makes it just as useless as Sandslash, so Brawly swaps out into Girder again. Without a burn, this thing remains a massive problem, and with Mawile at such low health, I this time have to pivot between Gyarados and Blastoise. The attack drops eventually cause Brawly to swap in Hariyama, which I'm not too afraid of since it only has Fake Out, Fighting Moves, and Bullet Punch. This makes it pretty much completely safe for Haunter to come in and burn it, and I gotta say, I'm very grateful that neither this thing or the Girder has guts. Burning Hariyama does cause it to set up with a Bulk Up, so I swap for a few Intimidates before sending back in Haunter. From here, I start launching Sludges. It's the only special attack I have on my team, so it's pretty much my best bet. My one regret in this fight is going for the final Sludge. I'm risking a Bullet Punch crit here, which is completely unnecessary since I could just swap between Intimidators and have Hariyama go down to burn. I don't end up getting punished this time, but if you do that type of thing enough, you eventually face the consequences of RNG. Lycanroc could still do some decent damage with super effective hits, so I make sure to pivot between my Intimidators a bit before fighting it with Gyarados. I even end up getting back above half HP with a Berry Juice before striking back with a Bulldoze that doesn't quite take Lycanroc out, but takes it in range of burn. Girder comes in, so I start swapping around for some sketchy Intimidates. My Intimidate shuffling once again pushes my girder problem into the future, but at least I finally get to put Sandslash out of its misery. Most of my HP bars are pretty severely crippled at this point, and we still have to deal with girder. Because it's Brawly's last Pokemon, there's at least no way for him to get rid of the Intimidate drops, but at this point, both of my Intimidators are deep in the red. I risk getting crit by Fire Punch just to try and set up Leech Seed, but Blastoise gets fully paralyzed at the worst possible time. The residual damage and healing from Leech Seed would at least allow me to swap around and stall it out, but without enough health on Haunter to come in and safely burn it, I could practically smell the inside of that truck. All I had was one final Gambit, the one Pokemon I still hadn't sent into battle, and Carkol, the son of a b****, actually does it. With the burn, there's actually a way for me to get through the fight without losing any Pokemon. Carkol always baits low sweep, so he can safely swap in Haunter despite having just 5 HP. Then for the final turn, Girder tries for the priority Mach Punch, which of course can't hit Haunter either, granting us a slow but sure victory as we watch Girder turn by turn burn to its demise. Wait a minute, am I one of the bad guys? You can't just fade into the next split without absolving me of some guilt, what the fuck? On our quest to Mega Evolve all our Pokemon, we actually can't until we beat Flannery, making Watson the most unfair split, because we're gonna have to fight one without having one of our own. Once Mr. Briny takes us to Slateport, I head north to Route 110, where we can get one of 2 Megas. Getting a Shinx of our own would be great, since Mega Luxray is busted, but Electrike is much more common. Even so, it does get Lightning Rod, which ain't half bad for the upcoming gym. Before the gym, we can get another encounter on Route 117. Worst case, we pick up Machop, but Scyther, Heracross, and Pinsir are all incredible potential pickups. Getting Heracross is pretty nice, since we can pre-burn it with a Flame Orb that we just got to activate Guts. Unfortunately, we're not able to go to Verdant Turf to pick up a Link Cable to evolve Haunter. Phoebe's twin sister Ursula may not be as good a battler, but she's certainly better at getting in my way. We also have the option of taking on Fantina before the gym, giving us some great items and most importantly, Mega Stones. However, because we can't actually use Megas until we beat Flannery and our team is extremely underprepared to take her on, I decide to put the encounter off. As for my final preparations before the gym, I make sure to evolve the Pokemon I can, because we're gonna need all the help we can get. Watson may not have a full team of 6, but he does have the first Mega Evolution we'll have to face. He also immediately sets up Electric Terrain for 8 turns to boost the power of his Electric-type moves by 50%. That's a power boost we definitely don't want to keep around, so we want to deal with this Dedenne as swiftly as possible. A single Sludge is just barely not enough to take Dedenne out, so I start by setting up a Leech Seed to get a bit of HP back as we set up for the KO. I do end up getting an incredibly low roll and not taking Dedenne out, which doesn't matter since it's still in range of being taken out by Leech Seed. This brings in Mega Luxray, which is by far the biggest problem our team has to deal with, and I don't have any great answers to it, so my plan is admittedly a little bit scuffed. If I swap around to intimidate this thing too much, Watson is just gonna switch. So my less than ideal plan is as follows. First, go into Manectric to dodge the Thunderfang with Lightning Rod, then swap out into Colossus to get hit by a Bite and pray to every known god in the universe that I activate Flame Body. Yes, my plan sucks more than a top-shelf vacuum cleaner, you don't have to tell me twice, but it's all I've got right now with the Pokemon at my disposal. Once Luxray gets burned, we can all celebrate what a great idea this was and praise my great strategic mind. The only problem being Luxray refusing to trigger my 30% chance to burn. At this point, swapping in Colossal again would lead to a sad and eternal existence in the Pokemon PC, so I make one last-ditch effort to try and at least give 2 more chances to get a burn by going for 1 more Intimidate. I then pivot through Manectric again to bait Bite, and at the last possible second, Colossal clutches up just like last time. I was fully prepared to send in Colossal again to possibly burn Luxray with its lifeless body. Now that Watson's sharing the consequences of my carbon footprint, I'm much more comfortable staying in and going for a Snarl. Despite reducing its special attack, Watson doesn't love that I'm lowering its stats, so it swaps out into Magneton, which is perfect since I get to lower its special attack. I swap in Gyarados on the Tri-Attack and take a ton more damage than I expected from a critical hit. At least I've got a Berry Juice to get some of it back. Now baiting an Electric move, I can basically get a free special attack boost by sending in Manectric. I continue lowering its special attack with Snarl to take less damage from Tri-Attack, causing Watson to swap out and send in Vikavolt. This is just about the best case scenario, since I get the chip damage I need on Vikavolt, lower its special attack, and bait Bug Buzz all at the same time. Heracross can safely swap into the -1 Bug Buzz and pick up the KO with a Guts boosted Rock Tomb, which has a 100% chance to KO because of the chip damage we got earlier. Once Kilowattrel comes in, I pivot through Mawile to bait the electric type move to get myself a special attack boost when I send in Manectric. Despite resisting Air Slash, this is still a pretty risky matchup since Kilowattrel could chain flinches and there's nothing I could do about it. The fact that it doesn't flinch me with the first one and I get to lower its special attack with a Snarl helps a lot. I even get a critical hit with the second one, taking Kilowattrel into the red, which causes Watson to swap out into Magneton. I really wish I would have gone for Snarl here instead of Quick Attack, but I can fix this with a quick switch to Gyarados, and as long as I don't get status by Tri-Attack, a quad-effective Bulldoze is enough to put Magneton on the ground. From here, we just have to deal with Luxray and Kilowattrel, which is easier said than done. Despite the burn, Luxray can still deal a lot of damage with strong jaw biting moves, so I swap around between Boltund and Mawile to lower its attack with Intimidate. I even stay in against a Thunderfang to get off a Rock Tomb and lower Luxray's speed. Because he didn't switch out, I swap around for another Intimidate before going for my next Rock Tomb. Whether Watson swaps out or not, I still end up picking up a KO, but taking care of Kilowattrel is way better since the thing has Roost and could still cause some problems. Once Luxray comes back in, I swap into Manectric to dodge the Thunderfang with Lightning Rod and finish the job with a Quick Attack. Defeating Watson gets us our first couple Mega Stones, but we're not going to be able to use them unless we beat Flannery. Luckily, we can get most of our Pokemon to their final evolution with the new level cap of 47. We're even able to evolve Haunter now that we're allowed to pass Phoebe and go to Verdanturf. We can't quite go to Route 111 yet, so I head to Route 112. The most common encounter here is Numel, which would be great for the next gym, but I end up pulling Houndour. With access to Flash Fire, this thing is still a great encounter, and I'm certainly not complaining. Next, we head through Fiery Path, where there's another 2 possible encounters we can get. But with Bagon at 1%, I'm pretty much guaranteed to pick up Sizzlipede. In this house on Route 111, we can talk to the old man and pick up a Riolu egg. On Route 113, we're extremely likely to pull either Snorunt or Slackoth, but I end up pulling the 4% Munchlax, which is huge. Which I mean is a compliment to your battling skills and not a jab at your weight, which is completely fine, by the way. Once we reach Fall Arbor Town, I hatch my Riolu egg, but that's not the only egg we can pick up here. In Fall Arbor Town, we can find this guy who's willing to trade shards for starter eggs, so we can use locations like Route 102 or cities where we can't get any encounters at all to hatch ourselves the remaining 8 Mega Evolvable starters, rounding out our box quite nicely. And we're gonna need it since this is where the game seriously ramps up in difficulty. Before we can even think about taking on Team Magma, we've got to fight the Hail Trainer Gauntlet. Most of these Pokemon are extremely easy to deal with since Ice is the worst type in the game, but I had to make sure to find completely safe strategies like taking on this Beartic with Heracross to never be KO'd by crit Icicle Crash. The most dangerous Pokemon we face are Arctovish and Arctozolt, who both have Slush Rush. To deal with Arctovish, I swap between my Intimidators to lower its attack and let it chip away at its own health with Life Orb. This eventually causes it to take itself out, but it's kind of a risky strategy since it could crit at any time. Then there's Hiker Lucas's Arctozolt. I keep Intimidate looping it every time it comes out to guarantee that Lucas swaps it in last. For this one, I find a completely safe strategy. Swampert is immune to Bolt Beak, so it baits Icicle Crash. Slowbro is never dead to crit and gets all of its health back from Regenerator every time I switch. It also conveniently baits Bolt Beak, so I can just continuously swap between the two and let Arctozolt deal Life Orb damage to itself every time it uses Icicle Crash against Slowbro. I feel like an absolute degenerate for having to use such depraved strategies to beat regular trainers, but this game has no mercy, and I'm going to use whatever strategy I can come up with as long as it works. Before we get to take on Flannery, we've got to fight Team Magma on Mount Chimney, and the one I'm worried about is the one versus Courtney and this idiot Grunt. This is a double battle featuring a Mega Evolution. On top of that, we can't use rock moves against Centiskorch because of its ability, and we can't use any water moves as long as Cradilly's out because of Storm Drain. This, however, is not a true double battle. It counts as a multi-battle for our opponent, so if we can knock out one side, we'll have a 2 against 1. I start by Mach Punching Cradilly to get rid of its Choppleberry. Centiskorch only has resisted moves against fire fighting types, thus my Blaziken and Fernape duo. With a wide lens, Blaziken can take out Cradilly with high jump kick before it gets to move. Bombardier comes in and only sees a KO against Blaziken because of its lower health and defense drop. This makes for a perfect opportunity to swap in Gyarados to get off an Intimidate and tank Bombardier's dual Wing Beat. Centiskorch does some pathetic damage to Infernape, and because of Gyarados' Intimidate, we're not even close to dead to a second Fire Lash even if it crits. I don't actually want to take Centiskorch out, but I finish the turn by taking Centiskorch into the red with an Aqua Tail before the Grunt sends in his final Pokemon, Iron Thorns. Now theoretically, Iron Thorns could easily take out Gyarados here with an electric type move, but it sees a priority KO against Infernape with Accelerock, so I swap out into Empoleon. He tanks both of the hits, allowing Gyarados a free Aqua Tail to take Iron Thorns below half. At this point, Iron Thorns could take out either of my Pokemon, so I swap to Swampert and protect with Empoleon, who ends up drawing in both hits. The beauty of this turn is that whoever Iron Thorns attacks, it still ends up crashing with Supercell Slam and going down. From here, it's a super easy 2v1. Swampert's baiting a Power Whip, so I send in Charizard to quad resist it. Courtney tries to be slick and save her Mega Evolution, but just ends up sacking her Tauros with the Mega to follow. Finally, she's got a Superior, but Gyarados has just enough health left to barely survive a crit Leaf Storm, so I can take care of it with an Air Slash Ice Fang combo. Preparing for a difficult double battle always makes it super easy to do singles right afterwards, but the only thing I'm really scared of is Maxie's Chi-Yu. There's nothing I can swap in that can take it out in one hit, so my only option was to either sack Gyarados to a crit to bring in something that can take it out, or just not get crit and take it out with an Aqua Tail. In the end, we survived the Magma Gauntlet without any casualties. Before Flannery, there's a couple more encounters we can pick up, starting with Jagged Pass, where I find an Audino. I also just repelled through Route 114 when doing the Snow Trainer Gauntlet, so I forgot to pick up either Swablu or Snover. Both have abilities that can disrupt Flannery's Sun, so I'm perfectly content picking up Swablu. My final bit of preparation is taking on Fantina. Beating her gets you an Expert Belt and Leftovers, on top of a bunch of Megastones that we really want. The only real issue on our team is Miss Magus, which I can't quite one-shot with Gengar, but going for a slow flip turn means I have enough damage to take it out. Unfortunately, she makes things difficult by swapping it out, so I have to deal with a bunch of her other Pokemon before she swaps it back in. Thankfully, she does so against Snorlax, giving me a free switch into Gengar since she can't possibly go for a Ghost-type move. This makes her final Pokemon Mega Banette, which is extremely strong, but Mawile can still easily handle it. And so, with my new items, I'm ready to take on the 4th gym. Flannery's Sun team is by far the most dangerous team we've faced so far. Thankfully, we've got some pretty good resources of our own to take her on. Despite the Sun, Snorlax barely takes any damage at all from a crit Flamethrower because of Thick Fat. It's just the name of the ability. I'm not making any implications about your weight. You are perfect. In fact, I'm going to be relying on that Thick Fat for the rest of the fight. After poisoning Ninetales, I go for a Stomping Tantrum, taking it into the red after poison, just in case she wants to preserve her Ninetales to be able to set up the Sun again and swap in her Levitating Rotom to dodge the Stomping Tantrum. I switch it up and go for Rock Slide. The best way to deal with this Rotom is gonna be another degenerate switching strategy. Its only attacking moves are Electric and Fire type, and unfortunately for Flannery, I've got both an Electric and a Fire immunity on my team. PP stalling is extremely annoying since we've got to keep track of exactly how many Thunderbolts, Overheats, Will-O-Wisps, and Pain Splits this thing has used. Rotom can only use Fire moves or Pain Split against Swampert, so it's always a safe switch to Houndoom. From there, it can't use any Fire moves against Houndoom, so I can safely swap back into my Electric immune Swampert, which eventually causes it to completely run out of attacking moves. From there, I start stalling it out of Pain Split, which thankfully doesn't actually break Air Balloon. As soon as it's run out of all its moves except for Will-O-Wisp, we can safely just stay in with Arcanine since it can't do anything to us. Even if Flannery swaps out here, we can always just swap Arcanine in anytime she switches in Rotom, but she just ends up letting it go and sends in the biggest threat on our team, Mega Infernape. This thing is basically just power-crept Mega Lucario, with speed as fast as Dragapult and 137 base attack and special attack. Let's just say you don't want to be on the receiving end of Mega Infernape's adaptability hits. Even after Intimidate, Gyarados takes a ton of damage from a resisted close combat. There's not a great counter for this thing in our entire box, so we're gonna have to do some switching shenanigans again to be able to deal with it at all. But as I send in Slowbro to tank a Flare Blitz, Flannery switches in Walking Wake. Without the Sun to activate Photosynthesis or to power up its Hydro Steam, this thing just isn't that much of a threat. On top of that, with Choice Specs, I know exactly what move it's gonna use every single turn, so I can just stall it out with Snorlax. Mega Infernape swaps in to pick up an easy KO, so I swap out into Gyarados to once again lower its attack with Intimidate. After baiting a Mach Punch, we're always baiting Thunder Punch here, so I can safely swap to Swampert. Our new loop is swapping between Swampert and Slowbro. Slowbro always baits the Thunder Punch, so we can safely send in Swampert, and Slowbro is comfortable tanking anything that isn't Thunder Punch. With its Regenerator ability, Slowbro also gets 30% of its health back every time we switch out, topping us back up to full HP. Once Infernape runs out of its 5 close combats, it starts going for Flare Blitz against Swampert. We of course switch to have it hit Slowbro, and every turn this causes Infernape to take just a little bit of recoil damage. There are of course a couple of RNG elements that could affect us here. The first is crits, which doesn't matter at all as long as it doesn't crit several times in a row. The second one is Flare Blitz's 10% chance to get a burn, which Infernape ends up landing fairly quickly. This however is fully accounted for, since even after burn, we get back to full HP with Regenerator. The one issue I eventually run into is Infernape running out of Thunder Punches, so Swampert gets hit by a Flare Blitz. A crit plus burn here still wouldn't take Swampert out, but it makes it a little bit more difficult to stall out the rest of Infernape's health. First I can send in Slowbro, but that doesn't quite finish the job, so I pivot into Arcanine on another Flare Blitz, then into Gyarados on the incoming Mach Punch, then circle back into Slowbro to take the last Flare Blitz to finally get rid of Mega Infernape. With both of her two biggest threats defeated, Flannery sends out Scovillain, but this thing can be easily walled by Altaria. She resists literally everything this thing can do to us, and it just eventually takes itself out with its own life orb. Torkoal comes in and sets up the sun, so I send in my dedicated counter Houndoom. This Torkoal only has Overheat, Solar Beam, and Scorching Sands as its attacking moves. This is why I gave Houndoom that air balloon, so that Torkoal has to attack me with Solar Beam and deal barely any damage at all, giving me the tempo to take it out with a couple of Scorching Sands. This leaves Flannery with Ninetales, so I can just switch back out into Altaria and finish it off with a Bulldoze. And defeating Flannery is the biggest turning point of the run. Defeating Flannery gives us our very own Infernapite, but the most important thing we get from May right after exiting the gym is the Mega Ring. We also get the Go Goggles and are thus able to go into the desert. The only two encounters we can get in the sand are Larvitar or Gible, but we can guarantee to get Gabite at Mount Pyre, so I delay my encounter to guarantee we get both, and instead head to the top floor of Mirage Tower to pick up the only Mega Evolvable encounter, Kangaskhan. Now that we can actually use Mega Evolutions, we of course need to start collecting all the Mega Stones, and we can pick up about half of them by taking on the Winstraight family. At face value, taking on these 4 trainers back to back sounds like an Elite Four adjacent challenge, but with only 2 Pokemon each, it's actually pretty easy. It's the perfect time to employ the broken Megastone that we just got from Flannery. Everyone in the Winstraight family does have a Mega Evolution, so we need to be a little bit careful. For Victor, Mega Infernape can easily take out Boltund and U-turn out against Pidgeot, who gets pretty effectively walled by Empoleon. The second trainer, Victoria, has her Satitan torn apart by Infernape, and her Mega Slowbro basically has no chance against my toxic stalling Snorlax. The third trainer is completely free for Infernape. I don't Mega Evolve against Pelipper since I deal more damage with Iron Fist Thunder Punch. From there, even though the rain is up, an adaptability quad-effective Flare Blitz easily knocks out Mega Scizor. Finally, there's Vicky, whose Duraludon falls to Infernape, and Mega Medicham gets defeated by Slowbro. Defeating this gauntlet gets us a long list of Mega Stones, which is probably the most important thing we do during Norman Split. I'm not trying to disrespect the old man, Normal just isn't the strongest type in the game. Don't let his lead Obstagoon fool ya. This is actually Zoroark, and it's probably the most annoying Pokemon on his team because of its held Focus Sash. I let Snorlax break it and then swap out into Gengar in a Hyper Voice and finish the job with a Sucker Punch. Iron Valiant looks scary, but we scare it off instantly with just 1 Intimidate. After Zoroark, it's really just Iron Valiant and Ursaluna that we need to worry about. Ursaluna is incredibly threatening with its powerful Blood Moon attack, but thankfully it can only use it every other turn. It deals a ton to Venusaur as I swap in, but with a Giga Drain, I can get a lot of that health back, which gets me to just enough HP that I'm able to survive a critical hit Earth Power that Ursaluna of course ends up getting. But neither that or the special defense drop matters when I can just outspeed with another Giga Drain to take care of the bear. The real Obstagoon comes out next, and this is where things go really south for Norman. I can resist a knockoff with Infernape as I swap in, and Mega Evolve to instantly knock Obstagoon out with a close combat. Mega Slacking puts up a little bit of a fight and doesn't instantly succumb to ape-on-ape violence. An adaptability close combat would just barely fall short of the KO, so I start with a U-turn and swap out into Gengar to dodge an Earthquake. The only move that can actually hit Gengar on Slacking's moveset is Play Rough, and he seems extremely keen to demonstrate that we're always able to survive the crit before we knock it out with a close combat. Whatever then compels him to send out Cyclozar instead of Iron Valiant, I couldn't tell you, but I get to take it out in 1 hit and bring out his final Pokemon. Because Iron Valiant doesn't have any priority, I can safely U-turn into Mawile to get an Intimidate drop. At this point, Norman has no way to swap out and shake off these attack drops, so I do one more switch to Gengar and back to Mawile to drop Iron Valiant's attack again. At this point, it's barely dealing any damage to us, so I can finish it off with a Play Rough to claim our easiest badge of the challenge so far. The Winona split of Emerald Imperium is extremely scary because of the double battle at Weather Institute. But on my way there, I encounter Crasher Wake.
It's better be good if you're interrupting my training. Am I? I'm Crafter Wake, of course. I came over to the Hoenn region because I heard there's plenty of water to train in, but honestly, I'd give it maybe a 7 out of 10. Anyway, give it a battle or not.
Defeating Crasher Wake gets us a ton of great water-type Megastones, but the most important reason to beat him is because of the Focus Sash. This is probably the strongest item in the game since it works like in Generation 9 where you get it back after every single battle. My Mega Evolution of choice for this fight is Manectric, who can easily knock out Politoed with a Thunder that Politoed graciously made 100% accurate by setting up Rain. Swift Swim Kingdra, Urshifu, and Dragon Dancing Focus Sash Gyarados are all extremely tricky Pokemon to deal with. Because we've already defeated Politoed in the first turn, Wake has no way of setting up the Rain again. This way, as I stall out Kingdra with Poison, I'm also stalling out the 8 Rain turns so that Wake doesn't get a boost to his Water-type moves and his special abilities. After a few Protects, by the time I send in Altaria, Kingdra is already in the red and goes down the same turn that Rain disappears. I'm then able to get Mega Lapras poisoned, which causes Wake to swap out into Urshifu as I send in Gyarados. My plan to deal with Urshifu goes horribly wrong, as Altaria instantly gets poisoned and crit by a Poison Jab. I stay in to try and take it out with a Moonblast, but Wake just swaps out into Toedscruel. I switch out into Infernape, hoping to take care of this thing with a Flare Blitz, but Wake pulls a double switch, sending in his Focus Sashed Gyarados, which is absolutely perfect. My idea was to break its Focus Sash with U-turn, but Wake pulls a triple switch, allowing me to U-turn out into Boltund when Urshifu comes in. I end up risking a Thunder here to pick up the KO, which is certainly worth it since Urshifu is one of the most broken Pokemon of all time. I Toxic Stall a bit against Lapras by first going for Protect and then bounce to get it low enough to pick up the KO. The fact that Gyarados still has its Focus Sash intact is pretty annoying, but I can at least get off and Intimidate with my Boltund as the Gyarados sets up with Dragon Dance, getting it to neutral attack. As long as we don't get crit here, Mega Manectric is able to survive, and I go for a Volt Switch to not miss a Thunder. Being a quad-effective electric type move, this easily brings Gyarados down to its Focus Sash, and I swap out into Gengar, who can finish the job with a Sucker Punch. Toedscruel has a myriad of resisted moves to choose from here, so I eventually win the War of Attrition, taking it down for the victory. With my new Gyarados and Focus Sash in hand, we can actually dodge every single trainer on Route 118 and Route 119 to get to Weather Institute. Before taking on Team Aqua though, I make sure to use my newfound ability to surf to pick up a few new encounters, first on Route 107 where I find a Scyther. I then head to Route 109 just south of Slateport City where this grass guarantees that the only Mega Evolvable Pokemon we can pick up is Shelgon. Both of these new additions are absolute powerhouses and some of the strongest non-legendary Pokemon of all time, which I'm very happy to add to the team since we're going into the dreaded double battle mid-game. Much like we did versus Team Magma up on Mount Chimney, we now have to face Team Aqua in a double battle. There are a ton of double battles in this game, and they are exponentially more difficult to plan for than the singles. We start by facing Armaldo and Mega Machamp, so I fake out Armaldo and then go for a Hyper Voice to take out more than half of both of our opponent's health. This does mean Blastoise gets Thunder Punch, but we're always able to survive a critical hit here, so the worst thing that could happen is that we get paralyzed. Thunder Punch of course hits twice because of Mega Machamp's ability, but I'm then able to take out both Machamp and Armaldo the following turn with another Hyper Voice. This brings in Ogerpon and Starmie, who both see KO against Blastoise because of the damage from Machamp, so I just protect to dodge both the hits to get a free Psychic on Ogerpon. Because we know exactly what Ogerpon and Starmie want to do, we can just send in Sceptile to resist both the moves. Unfortunately, the Horn Leech does give Ogerpon enough HP back to survive another Psychic. Sceptile getting paralyzed is a bit of a bummer, but I don't plan on using it to attack anyway, so it's not that big a deal. We can't even stay in with Sceptile since Starmie sees KO with Ice Beam and Ogerpon with Play Rough. Thankfully, Snorlax is able to survive even if both of these moves were to crit, so I basically get another free Hyper Voice, taking care of Ogerpon and doing over half to Starmie. The one really bad thing that could happen here is if Greninja gets a flinch with Dark Pulse, but thankfully, after Starmie whips a Hydro Pump into Snorlax's Protect, I just take it out with a Moonblast. And with Greninja defeated, we've reduced the fight to a 2v1. I was hoping to quad resist Hydro Pump with Sceptile, but it ends up hitting Gardevoir, who then takes Starmie out with a Moonblast. The Grunt's final Pokemon is Iron Jugulus. The problematic thing here is Jugulus sees KO on both of my Pokemon, so I have to protect with Gardevoir as the Jugulus air slashes the Snorlax. At this point, it only sees KO against Gardevoir, so I can safely swap in Salamence and go for a Body Slam. The only move that sees a KO is Dragon Pulse against Salamence, so I can swap in my Fairy-type Gardevoir for free and get another free Body Slam. From there, all I need to do is protect Gardevoir to get a third free body slam for the KO. I was extremely afraid that this fight would break our deathless streak, but the run continues going strong. After the double battle, we need to take down Shelly, but this fight isn't nearly as difficult. I bring back Mega Manectric, who easily takes care of Keldeo and Mega Gyarados. Once we reach Fortree City, we could theoretically immediately take on Winona, but before doing so, we could take on the game developers who not only give us the choice items, but also some much needed Mega Stones. These trainers are pretty strong, but to get the items they have on offer, I am perfectly willing to sacrifice a ton of my Pokemon, probably half of my box. Against Trainer Cap, we face Mega Charizard X, and if we can beat him, we'll have a Charizardite X and Y of our own. For this fight, I bring Mega Gyarados since I'm able to intimidate on the switch in, and then eventually pick up a KO with Crunch. From there, it's all downhill for Cap, losing Conkeldurr to a Moonblast, Celesteela to Overheat, after which Venusaur takes care of Lantern, and Slowbro takes care of Donphan. The reason to fight Cap first is because I plan to use Mega Charizard X against the other two trainers. The second trainer is the creator of the game, Irriv24, who leads with a Rillaboom and taunts me so that I can only use a single Dragon Dance. But that one Dragon Dance is all I need to take care of Rillaboom with one dual Wing Beat. His Mega Evolution is the offensive Mega Empoleon, but it gives up a lot of its defensive stats, so a Tough Claws +1 Brick Break is more than enough to knock it out in one hit. Mega Charizard continues her sweep by taking out both Florges and Ampharos with a single Flare Blitz each. The sweep is cut slightly short though by getting paralyzed by Ampharos' static. Without the paralysis, I would have outsped and easily taken out Alakazam despite its Focus Sash with a dual Wing Beat, but instead I've got to swap in Snorlax and take it out with a couple of Body Slams, which brings in the final Pokemon Tyranitar. Between Leech Seed, Sleep Powder, and Giga Drain, our starter has no problem taking it out for the victory. The third is Trainer X, who leads with a Galvantula that wants to set up Sticky Web. In this case, we can use our Mega Evolution to trick him, since Thunder would be super effective against base Charizard, but Charizard X swapping its Flying type for Dragon type resists Thunder. This gives me a free first turn Dragon Dance and a free second turn Dragon Dance as Galvantula sets up its Sticky Web. We then work around Galvantula's Focus Sash by taking it out with a dual Wing Beat and drop Mega Torterra with a super effective Flare Blitz. Greninja swaps in just to get instantly Brick Broken, and I'm only forced to swap out once he sends in Mimikyu. I once again stall it out with Leech Seed and Sleep Powder, which brings in Darmanitan. All I need to do is pivot through Salamence to swap in Slowbro, who can easily pick up the KO with Scald. The final Pokemon is Malamar, and I did a massive miscalculation here. I put in Gengar's level as 100, so obviously it told me Dazzling Gleam would KO, which it doesn't. This is the type of stupid mistake I probably should be punished for, especially by a high critical hit ratio move like Psycho Cut, but Gengar ends up just barely surviving to keep the deathless dream alive. Again, I'd be willing to trade probably over half of my box for these items, so I'm pretty glad I got through it without having to lose any Pokemon whatsoever. With my new Mega Stones, the TM for Earthquake, and all the choice items obtained, I move on to Route 120. The only Pokemon I'm able to pick up here is Absol before taking on the 6th gym. I used to lose to Winona a lot as a 6-year-old to her Dragon Dancing Altaria, and I really don't want to make the same mistake today. I didn't know where to find the Ice Beam TM, so can you really blame me? Turn 1, I immediately try to take out Staraptor with a Thunderbolt, but Winona wisely swaps out into her Flygon. This Life Orb Tinted Lens Flygon is a force to be reckoned with, so I swap in my Salamence on an Earthquake and bait out Draco Meteor with my Intimidate. I'm able to survive the absurdly strong super effective hit with a Habon Berry and then finish off Flygon with a Dragon Claw. This brings out Thundurus, so I send in my special tank Snorlax on a Sludge Wave. Winona switches it up and goes for a Thunderbolt to deal a bit more damage, but I deal over half with an Ice Punch. I protect for a turn to get some HP back from leftovers and then finish Thundurus off the following turn. Aggron comes in and Snorlax is baiting a Body Press, so I swap out into Lucario, who might seem like a terrible switch in, but I can always survive with my Focus Sash and then pick up the KO with a quad effective close combat. This is why Focus Sash is by far the best item in the game, since we can do things like that and swap into moves that would otherwise take us out. Staraptor comes out next, so I swap in Manectric on a Brave Bird and zap it out of the sky with a Thunderbolt. I definitely can't stay in and get destroyed by an Earthquake like when I was 6, so I swap out with a Volt Switch before Altaria gets to move into my Salamence, who dodges with its flying typing. My secret weapon to deal with Altaria is Mega Audino. This thing is incredibly bulky, but as soon as we set up a Wish, Winona swaps out into her final Pokemon Frostmoth. My plan was to get Altaria poisoned poisoned, but I end up poisoning the bug instead. I brought Infernape specifically for this thing. If it sets up a Quiver Dance, it does outspeed. However, I am holding the Choice Scarf that we just picked up before the gym, which means Frostmoth setting up Quiver Dance basically just gives me a free KO. All we need to do now is deal with Altaria, so I swap back out into Mega Audino for a Wish Protect Toxic combo, which ends up being an incredibly effective way to get Altaria low enough that I can knock it out with a Moonblast. We've still been able to hold on to the Deathless run, but with the difficult fights to come, that could all change real fast. We start the 7th split by heading to the Ancient Tomb, where normally we'd be able to catch Registeel, but we are not interested. We're here because the only Pokemon we can catch here is Metang, a much better Steel type if you ask me. At this point, there are more Sinnoh leaders that we could fight, but like Byron here, he doesn't actually give us anything useful since we don't have the Pokemon that he gives us Mega Stones for. So I head right past him to Mount Pyre, where at the top, there's only one Mega Evolvable Pokemon we can catch, Gabite. Catching it, of course, makes Gible a dupe, eliminating it from the encounter pool on Route 111, where we can now only pick up Larvitar. Larvitar is a huge pickup, since it offers us a brand new strategy, Sand. This is an invaluable tool against the Sun trainers before we reach Mossdeep City. Without Tyranitar, we just have to find a way to tank these powerful fire moves in the Sun. Without the weather, these trainers drop like flies, and we easily make it to Mossdeep City. Steven and Drake tell me they'll handle Team Magma, so I go to the gym. From here on out, this game is difficult double battle after difficult double battle until we reach the final gym. First, we've got to beat the Psychic twins Tate and Liza, who set up their Psychic terrain so we can't use any priority moves. I start by having Tyranitar protect while baiting a Sacred Sword from Iron Leaves. With a Choice Scarf, Metagross is able to outspeed Tapu Lele and one-shot it with Meteor Mash. As Kangaskhan in, Tyranitar is baiting fighting moves from both of our opponents, so I can swap to Gengar to get a free Meteor Mash on Kangaskhan. I then have Gengar protect itself from Kangaskhan's Crunch as Metagross gets hit by Sacred Sword this time. I then hit Kangaskhan with another Meteor Mash, which takes it down into the red. I swap out of Gengar to send in Absol, and Metagross gets hit by one more Sacred Sword before finishing off Kangaskhan with one more Meteor Mash. Tate now only has Espathra left. If I can get rid of it, it's gonna be a 1v1. I start by setting up for the next turn by sending in Gengar and protecting with Absol. I then double switch, sending in Mawile and Tyranitar, which causes Lumina Crash to whiff. Tyranitar baits Sacred Sword, so I've gotta protect, as Espathra unfortunately hits Mawile with Lumina Crash. Mawile isn't in range of a crit here, so I'm sitting comfortably and get some HP back from a Citrus Berry before fighting back and dealing over half to the Espathra. I make a switch into Absol and Gengar, causing the opponents to double whiff. Regular Absol is baiting the Sacred Sword, so I Mega Evolve, turning it into a Fairy Dark type, and Sucker Punch Espathra now that the Psychic terrain is gone. Gaining the Fairy type gets rid of my Fighting type weakness, so I survive the Sacred Sword and can finish off Iron Leaves with a Shadow Ball. Farigiraf comes in next, but with Mega Absol's Sharpness ability boosting all of its slashing moves by 50%, it stands no chance against my Night Slash. Before attacking, I swap out of Gengar into Mawile, just to let it watch Absol rip its namesake apart. Liza's final Pokemon is Mega Alakazam, and I completely spaced here, figuring it would copy Absol's ability with Trace, giving it Sharpness instead of Intimidate. Unfortunately, it does cause the attack drop, which means I can't actually get the KO with a single Sucker Punch. Fortunately, we've got nothing to worry about since I've got Sucker Punch on Mawile as well to pick up the KO and grant us our 7th gym badge. After beating the gym, Steven gives us the Magma emblem to head to the Magma hideout. Here we have to face both Tabitha and Courtney back to back, and they've got 4 Pokemon each. Basically, this is like facing a single trainer that has 8 Pokemon in total. Obviously, we only have 6, so we can't just match up 1-to-1 and try to bring counters. To beat Talonflame, I bring it down to its Focus Sash with Rock Tomb as it sets up Tailwind. I take a bit of damage from Brave Bird, and Rough Skin knocks Talonflame out before recoil. Komodo comes in next, so I send in Gardevoir, which causes Courtney to instantly swap into Centiskorch. I send in Salamence on a Fire Lash and finish off the bug with a dual Wing Beat. Once Komodo comes back in, I swap back to Gardevoir on the Dragon move and tank a Flash Cannon before picking up the KO with a Moonblast. So far, we're doing pretty good. To deal with Serperior, I send in Mega Venusaur, who unfortunately gets paralyzed, but still able to finish the job. Going into the fight versus Tabitha, I felt my team was in pretty decent shape. Garchomp can instantly deal with his lead Pawmot, which brings out Hydreigon. This thing has choice specs, so locking itself into a dragon move is a death sentence as soon as I send in Gardevoir. Emboar's Bull Rush ability boosts its speed and attack the turn it comes in, so I go for Protect just to get rid of it and then swap out into Slowbro. Once I get rid of the pig, there's only one Pokemon left, but at this point, the team is pretty crippled. I've saved my most specially bulky Pokemon Snorlax for exactly this occasion, but Mega Houndoom's Dark Aura makes Fiery Wrath insanely powerful. I spend a turn protecting just to get as much HP back from leftovers as possible, and I'm just praying to RNGesus that I don't get flinched by Fiery Wrath. My Body Slam connects, but even after leftovers recovery from the next turn, I'm still in crit range here. Despite that, I don't actually have anything I can switch into here, so I ultimately decide to stay in. In hindsight, I'm not in love with this move. A critical hit Fiery Wrath can do up to 198 damage, which would take Snorlax out. Snorlax is probably my most valuable Pokemon on the team, and once I take Houndoom into the red, I'm left in a pretty bad position where I'm gonna have to sacrifice something anyway. Even though deep down in my heart I knew this would happen eventually, I was holding on to that deathless dream. There's no way I can beat a game as hard as Emerald Imperium deathless, even if I get to use Megas. I don't feel great about sacrificing Gardevoir since it's one of my only fairy types, but everything else is just too valuable to lose if I can help it. Thankfully, Garchomp was Scarfed to be able to outspeed Mega Houndoom. This is far from the end of our troubles though, since we now have to go up against Maxie for the final time. And this time, he's got a Groudon. If losing Gardevoir is a sign of what's to come, things could really go downhill from here. Maxie's got a crazy strong team, leading with Hawlucha and VGC All-Star Incineroar. I bring Infernape, and it's the perfect time to unleash Mega Pidgeot. Infernape fakes out Incin so that it can't fake out Pidgeot. In its Mega form, I'm then able to outspeed Hawlucha and take it out with a Hurricane. Mega Camerupt comes out next, threatening to take out Infernape with an Earth Power. I launch another Hurricane at Incineroar and then U-turn out into Gyarados. Ironically, because I now have two flying types out, Bulldoze can't hit me at all, and Maxie only ends up damaging his own Camerupt. Finally, Gyarados dodges that Earth Power meant for Infernape at the end of the turn. We then pick up a double KO, first with another Hurricane against Incineroar, and an Aqua Tail easily takes out Camerupt. There's nothing I really want to switch in here, and while I could try and play around Sucker Punch, it's easier to just stay in and go for a Hurricane to eliminate the Cacturn. Protect on Pidgeot would have been perfect here, but then we'd have the same problem the following turn. U-turning into something that can resist Dark Pulse after eating the Sucker Punch is another option, but then we'd still have to deal with Cacturn since quad effective U-turn still wouldn't be enough to take it out. Sacrificing Pidgeot also gives me a free switch into Lucario. Unfortunately, my master plan for Lucario doesn't quite work out. I was hoping Groudon would see an easy KO here and take Lucario down to its Focus Sash. Sadly, Groudon goes for Rock Slide, making for a very anticlimactic counter. I swap out of Gyarados into Infernape and protect Lucario from a Fire Punch. This way I can go for a Fake Out and at least get some free damage with close combat before switching Lucario out. I switch in Gyarados for the Intimidate drop and then U-turn into Slowbro. On the final turn, I protect Gyarados from another Fire Punch and take out Groudon with a Psychic. It sucks that we lost Mega Pidgeot, but at least we won't ever have to see Team Magma ever again. With Groudon on the loose, I head to Seafloor Cavern to take care of Team Aqua. And this time around during the admin gauntlet, things go slightly smoother. Mega Manectric starts by striking down Keldeo, and Swampert takes down Goodra. Salamence can take care of Decidueye, but I need a Choice Scarf to outspeed its buffed base 100 speed. Finally, there's Mega Gyarados, and because it doesn't see a KO against Salamence, I expect it to go for a Dragon Dance. I spend the dancing turn swapping into Lucario, who can easily survive the Earthquake with its Focus Sash. This sets him up perfectly to redeem himself from the fight versus Maxie and take out Gyarados with a counter. Thankfully, Admin Matt has nothing close to as dangerous as Mega Houndoom. Mega Manectric can take out his lead Frostlass with an Overheat, which brings in Machamp. I switch in Salamence to Intimidate on a resisted Drain Punch. I then send back in Mega Manectric against the incoming Thunder Punch to get yet another Intimidate. By Volt switching back and forth for damage and even more Intimidates, Matt eventually switches Machamp out. This works out pretty well for me though, since I Thunderbolt the Dragonite on the switch, breaking its multi-scale. With a Volt switch, I can then swap in Salamence against the incoming Earthquake and finish off Dragonite with a Dragon Claw. Against Greninja, I can just send in my full health Snorlax, who easily knocks it out after putting it to sleep. From there, I just need to send in Scarf Salamence to eat another Drain Punch for the victory. This is of course just the warm-up before our real final Team Aqua showdown versus Archie. Just like Maxie, he's Mega megalomaniacal enough to capture a weather god, which we similarly, of course, have to face in a double battle. Archie problematically leads with Iron Bundle, which I have nothing to outspeed even with a Choice Scarf after its Quirk Drive. So my plan is to fake out Golurk, which Kangaskhan can do because of Scrappy, and just tank the Hydro Pump. Either of my Pokemon could eat a crit at full health, so I'm perfectly safe to just launch a Thunderbolt to take Iron Bundle out in one hit. After Golurk flinches, Archie sends in Quackable, and I can now Mega Evolve Kangaskhan now that I don't need Scrappy anymore. Quackable gets immediately outsped and taken out by a Thunder at the start of the turn. I then crunch the Golurk, but even with Parental Bond, it's not quite enough to take it out, which unfortunately means Kangaskhan has to eat it. Sorry buddy, but thanks for helping me beat Iron Bundle. Archie then does his usual party trick and frees Willy. Golurk now sees a KO against Manectric, so I immediately Volt Switch out into Sceptile. Then everything falls into place as Kyogre goes for Water Spout. With a held Absorb Bulb, not only does this boost Sceptile's special attack, but it also increases its speed because of the Unburden ability. A Scald takes care of Golurk before it gets to move, and Blastoise gets double Leftovers recovery because of Rain Dish. Archie sends out Electros, so I protect with Blastoise to dodge its Electric type move, and then take out Kyogre with a +1 Leaf Storm before it gets the chance to Ice Beam me. You might think this powers Sceptile down because it takes me to -1 special attack after the double drop, but my Sceptile's actually built as a physical attacker specifically equipped with the Absorb Bulb to be able to take out Kyogre with Leaf Storm. Because Leaf Storm doesn't weaken my attack stat, I can simply outspeed Sharpedo and take it out with a non-weakened Leaf Blade. This does unfortunately mean I lose Sceptile to Dragon Pulse from Electros, but it took out both Primal Kyogre and Mega Sharpedo. I'm just upset it never got the chance to Mega Evolve, sorry buddy. With a Fake Out from Blastoise, I get a free turn of chip damage with Thunderbolt before I go for an Overheat the following turn. This isn't quite enough to take Electros out, but it puts it in range of being taken out by Scald, and though it may have cost us the Deathless run, we're finally done with the evil teams forever. Now I say that, but we still need to deal with some of their bullshit. With Groudon and Kyogre committed to fighting each other until the end of the world, we have no choice but to head to Sky Pillar to try and find Rayquaza. The only problem being that Drake got here before us, and apparently he's the reason we lost our Deathless streak since he's been secretly escalating the evil team nonsense from the shadows the whole time to get his hands on the ultimate dragon type. If you thought it was bad enough we had to face Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre, we also have to fight Mega Rayquaza. But I think I've put together a strategy that just might work. My Mega of choice for this run is Houndoom for two very particular reasons. Number one, we can instantly delete Magearna, which can be a huge problem if it ever gets to set up at all with its Soul Heart ability. Sure, we lose some special attack from Overheat, but Houndoom's only job is just to take out Magearna and tank this hit from Salamence. This leaves Blastoise at full HP, which is incredibly important for the following strategy. After we drop Salamence with an Ice Beam, Drake sends out Archaludon, which is probably the most annoying Pokemon to deal with on his team, which is saying something since the guy has a freaking Mega Rayquaza. It doesn't really matter what Mega Houndoom does here, so I just Scorching Sand Archaludon for a little bit of damage. The most important thing Houndoom can do here is go down to Wave Crash before Archaludon uses Electroshot. After the damage on Houndoom from dual Wing Beat, Electroshot sees KO on both of my Pokemon, and I need this to hit Blastoise. Obviously, this would be a terrible play if I'm just letting Blastoise go down, but I've equipped it with the Focus Sash, which is why it was so important that it stays at full HP. At the end of the turn, I can then strike back with a Mirror Coat to instantly delete Archaludon. Once Rayquaza comes in, I send in Slowbro to replace Houndoom and swap out into Mawile to get an Intimidate drop on both the opposing physical attackers. This causes Rayquaza to whiff a Dragon move into my Fairy type, and Tauros just goes for Rock Slide to try and take out Blastoise. The next turn, I protect with Mawile to get myself another free Ice Beam against Mega Rayquaza. I then swap into my own Flying Serpent for another Intimidate drop before a third Ice Beam takes care of the Ozone-dwelling Sock Puppet. Now down to his final two Pokemon, Drake sends in Gouging Fire. I switch again to get another Intimidate drop, meaning Tauros is basically out of the game at this point. Gouging Fire resets its attack by Dragon Dancing up before I take out Tauros with a Psychic. From here, the pattern's very simple. Because Mawile's baiting a Stomping Tantrum, I can swap into Gyarados to dodge it and simultaneously get another Intimidate drop. Gouging Fire could attack me with a Dragon move, but most likely it's gonna set up with Dragon Dance since I'm dropping its attack. Either way, Mawile can completely nullify the turn by switching in and intimidating away the Dragon Dance boost or simply dodging the Dragon move with its Fairy typing. Because my second Psychic gets a special defense drop, I only need one more turn to switch in Gyarados and tank a Flare Blitz before Slowbro picks up the final KO with a Psychic for the victory. With Drake out of the picture, Rayquaza is free to fly to Sootopolis City and descend from the heavens to quell Groudon and Kyogre's fighting. With world peace established by one green sky, Sky Monster, there's only one more badge we need to collect. The final gym in the Hoenn region has been swapped from the usual water type into the strongest type in the game, Fairy. What Juan doesn't realize is at this point, the Deathless dream is over. My unhinged era has begun, and I'm willing to let go of as many Pokemon as I need to get to the Elite Four. After all, I only get to bring 6 Pokemon from my box, so I only need my chosen 6 to survive. The Mega I bring to the fight is Venusaur, which comes in super handy with its poison typing, and the Thick Fat ability means that I barely take any damage from Tapu Fini's Ice Beam and can finish it off with a couple of Giga Drains, topping me off at full HP. Specs Fluttermane is super dangerous. With its incredible speed and buffed special attack, it can really deal some damage, but honestly, I feel like the glasses of choice really hold it back. Because of the specs, it can't switch out its moves, so as long as you send in a special wall that barely takes any damage like Tyranitar, this otherwise unstoppable force becomes super easy to deal with. Once Rapidash hits the field, I swap into Gyarados to get an Intimidate drop, and then into Torterra on a Wild Charge. Torterra is super dead to crit here, but we don't really need to play around it since Torterra wouldn't be coming to the Elite Four regardless. As long as we don't get crit, we can just get rid of Rapidash with an Earthquake. Once Mega Diancie comes in, I pivot into Venusaur to try and bait a Psychic type move, but Juan instantly swaps out into Ursaluna. This is a fantastic coincidence since full HP Venusaur is my best bet to deal with this thing. It does kind of stink that I'm slower since I don't get any HP back from Giga Drain, and Return manages to get a critical hit to almost take me into the red. I figure I'm still going to try and save as many Pokemon as possible, so I swap out into Gyarados and then pivot right out into Tyranitar to set up the sand. Because I saw KO with Aqua Tail, Juan switches out and sends in Tinkaton. I send in Torterra, figuring 2 Play Rough crits in a row is super unlikely. From there, as long as I connect with Sleep Powder, I just need 2 Earthquakes to take Tinkaton out because of its held Shucca Berry. Diancie comes in and I just want a free switch into Metagross, so unfortunately, I decide to let Venusaur go. It's not coming to the Elite Four, so sorry Venusaur, this'll be your final stop. The reason I didn't want to send Metagross in earlier is because I'm holding an air balloon to not get hit by Earth Power. None of Diancie's other moves can take Metagross out even with a critical hit, so I can safely take it out with a quad-effective Meteor Mash. Finally, we just need to beat Ursaluna, so I send in Gyarados, who I'm able to send in safely against a ground move and then finish Ursaluna off with an Aqua Tail. And so, with our final badge collected, there's only one more thing to do. Before reaching the Pokemon League, we've got to take on all 3 of our rivals, but I'm not going to let any of them stop me. At this point, I'm willing to lose any amount of Pokemon outside of my final 6 to just get to the Elite Four. But against Dawn, I didn't actually have to give up anything. Against May, I was ready to give up Audino to defeat her Urshifu. However, my strategy ends up working exactly as planned, and Urshifu whips a close combat into Gengar. This way, I'm able to survive a Sucker Punch at 1 HP with my Focus Sash the next turn, and take Urshifu out with a Dazzling Gleam. The rest of the Mons I can easily get through without losing a Pokemon, which just leaves Wally. His team has a lot of heavy hitters, but we can basically counter every single one of them except his final Mon, Choice Specs Shaman Sky. Snorlax is able to get it poisoned after getting hit by a Seed Flare, but the double special defense drop means I have no chance of surviving if I stay in. By protecting every other turn, I've burned 3 out of the 5 Seed Flare PP, so as long as Torterra makes the ultimate sacrifice, which does sting since it was our very first Pokemon, I can go for another Protect when I switch Snorlax in, causing Shaman to struggle. Because it's Wally's last Pokemon, this just guarantees us the victory. From here, we just have a few more trainers to beat that all have 4 Pokemon each, so they're extremely easy to prepare for since we get to bring 6. And for the most part, I can just let Mega Garchomp run wild and tear them apart. After several hours of calculations and planning, I decide on my final 6. Infernape is really solid against both of Sydney's possible teams, and the Mega Evolution has some of the best power output in the entire game. Gengar is mostly here for support to be immune to both fighting and normal moves, and Slowbro is here as our first physical tank with its amazing regenerator ability to get HP back every time we switch. Snorlax is just our best special defender, and Metagross is the other half of our physical core. Finally, I bring Tyranitar to be able to disrupt whichever weather Glacia brings against us. With our team decided, there's only one thing left to do, and once we enter, there's no going back. Sydney is the easiest Elite Four member to prepare for since whichever of the two possible teams he brings, he always leads with Moltres. Both of them are Focus Sash, so whichever one we face, we need to fake out with Infernape first before we can take them out with close combat. Sydney doesn't want to immediately give away his Moltres, so he swaps out into Monkey Dory to tank the hit. Both of Sydney's teams have a Monkey Dory, so this doesn't even reveal which one I'm facing. Either way, Monkey Dory gets completely countered by Metagross, so I can switch in for free against the Sludge Wave. After I take it out with a Meteor Mash, Sydney brings out Roaring Moon, which threatens to take me out with a knockoff. I'm able to swap into Infernape, who always survives the resisted hit, and can outspeed Roaring Moon, taking it out with a close combat. This brings in Delphox, baiting a Psychic, so I can perfectly U-turn out into Tyranitar. The Sand provides a 50% boost to my special defense, so Scorching Sands barely does anything, and I can take Delphox out with a crunch. Mega Absol comes out next, so I send in Slowbro against the close combat, and then immediately pivot out into Infernape against the Night Slash. This Absol doesn't have Sucker Punch, so we can safely stay in afterwards to take it out with a close combat, which brings in Moltres. Finally, Infernape gets to do what he was supposed to do the second turn of the fight and take it out with a close combat. This leaves Sydney with his last Pokemon, Grimmsnarl, so I can switch in Metagross to easily tank the Spirit Break and then outspeed and take it out with a Meteor Mash. Both of Phoebe's possible teams are problematic in their own way, and honestly, the Weezing lead is probably the worst one for us. We need to prepare for the eventuality of Mega Dusknoir regardless of which team we face, so I'm kinda glad we have to fight it. I choose Tyranitar as my Mega since we need it to defeat Calyrex Shadow, or in this case, Lunala. The first turn I go for a Rock Slide, which pays off immensely with a flinch, and I can even take Weezing out with a knockoff the turn after because of Sandstorm. Dusknoir is interesting since we can completely trivialize the matchup by just not giving Gengar an item. What's rough about this is if we would have faced the other team, Gengar would just be objectively worse than it could have been. The reason this strategy really works though is because Dusknoir's only attacking moves are Earthquake, which we can't get hit by because of Levitate, and the Ghost type move Poltergeist that can only hit you if you're holding an item. Without one, Dusknoir is basically limited to burning us with Will-O-Wisp and then setting up with Amnesia, which admittedly really slows down the process of taking it out with Dazzling Gleam, but once we do, Phoebe brings out Lunala so I can swap in Tyranitar on a Moongeist Beam. We do have to tank a couple of Moonblasts here, but without Stab, this would need 2 critical hits to be able to take Tyranitar out in the sand. Even with a Stab quad effective knockoff, we're not able to take Lunala out in one hit because of its Shadow Shield ability, falling just short with the Sandstorm. Just to avoid any possible critical hit nonsense here, I send in Metagross to tank the next Moonblast and let Sandstorm finish the job. As Pecharunt comes in, I make a couple of big misplays in the heat of the moment. I really shouldn't have gone for Zen Headbutt here since it doesn't really matter how much damage I get on this thing as long as I can't take it out because of Recover. As I switch to Snorlax though, it just swaps out with Parting Shot to bring out Drifblim. But Drifblim basically can't do anything to Snorlax. With Calm Mind, it can boost the power of its Air Slash, but that's the only move it can hit me with. Even after a couple of Calm Minds, once it actually attacks with Air Slash, I'm still able to survive a crit. And Phoebe only starts attacking since it's already too late, since Drifblim goes down to Poison the very same turn. As Pecharunt comes back in, I make my second big mistake of staying in with Snorlax and getting myself badly poisoned. At -1 attack, I can't even take Pecharunt out with an Earthquake, so I should have just stuck to the plan and swapped out into Metagross here. After getting poisoned, I realize what I need to do, and hopefully I'll still be able to pull it off. Pecharunt's only 2 attacking moves are Hex, which Snorlax can't be hit by, and Malignant Chain, which can't hit Metagross. What I should have been doing the whole time is just been swapping between the two, since that way Pecharunt couldn't do anything and it would eventually run out of PP. Before I can start doing so, Phoebe Parting Shots out into Pheasantipity, which I can take out with a Meteor Mash Bullet Punch combo. When Pecharunt comes back in, it's Phoebe's final Pokemon, so it doesn't matter if it starts spamming Parting Shot. What's positive is even though I'm badly poisoned, my strategy still works because of my held leftovers. The first turn of Toxic Poison always deals 1/16 of your health, which is exactly what you get back from leftovers, and the poison timer resets every time you switch. So I'm able to switch around until Pecharunt runs out of attacking moves completely and eventually has to just start spamming Parting Shot. It takes a long time to take it out since it lowers my attack all the way to -6, so I should have considered changing Metagross's ability to Clear Body instead of Tough Claws before the fight. Glacia is next, and she's incredibly difficult to prepare for since Snow and Sun are such different teams. Whichever Ninetales we face, they're both faster than Tyranitar, so we get to set up our weather last. Not having to deal with Chlorophyll, Slush Rush, or the boosted power of Fire-type moves is huge. The Sand also boosts Tyranitar's special defense by 50%, so we barely take anything from a super effective Energy Ball before one-shotting Ninetales with a a Rock Slide. As Hisuian Decidueye threatens to take us out with a quad-effective fighting type move, I pivot out into Gengar before sending in Infernape against a Sucker Punch. The next turn, we're faster, so the worst thing Decidueye can do is go for Sucker Punch again, which barely does any damage as a resisted hit, and we can finish it off with a super effective Flare Blitz. Darmanitan is next, which I can completely wall with Slowbro, and considering I can easily just one-shot with a Scald from full HP, Glacia immediately swaps into her water-absorbing Volcanion. Without the sun, this thing just isn't that dangerous, and we don't take too much damage from its highest power move, Hydro Steam. All I need to do is use Snorlax to get it poisoned and stall it out until it goes down. This brings out Darmanitan again, so I swap out into Slowbro, which immediately causes Glacia to switch in Reshiram as I go for Protect to try and get some leftovers back. Reshiram is the biggest threat to us here. While we have Pokemon that can switch into whatever move it's using, we don't have anything that can actually stay in and deal damage. Thankfully, its most dangerous move, Fusion Flare, only has 5 PP, and Dragon Pulse only has 10. By switching between my Pokemon and protecting every other turn, I can very quickly stall it out of its dangerous moves, which eventually allows Slowbro to stay in once it's down to just Aura Sphere and Flame Charge. Once I get Reshiram into the red, I slack off back to full HP and swap out into Gengar. I'm about to get hit by an Aura Sphere, so this switch is completely free, and I can finish off the dragon with a Sucker Punch the next turn. As Darmanitan comes in, we get to fight it with a full HP Slowbro because of Regenerator. This means we're never dead to crit Earthquake and can fire back with a Scald to take Darmanitan out once and for all. Finally, this leaves Glacia with her Mega Charizard Y. I stay in for a turn and let it Mega Evolve and Protect as it sets up the sun. Baiting Solar Beam, I pivot into Snorlax, which starts baiting Flamethrower. From there, I can swap out into Tyranitar to swap out the sun for Sand, which allows me to always survive both the Flamethrower and incoming Dragon Pulse afterwards, even if they're critical hits, to then finish off the Mega Charizard with a quad-effective Rock Slide. I'm sorry, Glacia, but we've gotta make it to the end game. The 4th Elite Four member, Drake, has been swapped out for Sinnoh's champion, Cynthia, and her team is by far the most dangerous lineup we've seen so far throughout the entire run. I immediately start the battle by setting up Stealth Rocks to get a bit of damage as Pokemon switch in, but mostly to break Cramorant's Focus Sash. Spiritomb just keeps spamming Poltergeist, so I protect every other turn to get Leftovers recovery and eventually take it out with Rock Slide. As Xerneas comes in, I can't waste any time in case it goes for Geomancy, so I swap in Metagross. A resisted Moonblast still does a ton, but once I Mega Evolve my Metagross, I'm faster than Xerneas and can take it out with a single Meteor Mash. Sorry, Cynthia, but I can't let you end the run with that kind of nonsense. After I let out a sigh of relief having defeated the Antlery Boy, Cynthia sends out Garchomp. Expecting an Earthquake, I've given Slowbro an Air Balloon to hold so that I can swap in for free. This also means Garchomp has to break the Air Balloon by wasting a turn going for Scale Shot. This allows me to launch a quad-effective Ice Beam, which just barely falls short of the KO. Because Scale Shot only hit twice, I'm always safe from crit here, so I don't have to swap into Gengar and go for Sucker Punch and can finish the job with another Ice Beam. Cramorant comes out next, but this thing isn't exactly the specially offensive threat of the century. In fact, Cynthia knows she can't win the matchup versus Snorlax, so she immediately swaps out into Zamazenta. Outside of Xerneas, this thing has the greatest potential of being a run ender, so I really needed to come up with a plan. I ended up giving Gengar a Focus Sash so we can swap in Gengar for free on a Body Press and then have one turn where we can't die to go for Will-O-Wisp. Since Zamazenta keeps setting up with Iron Defense, I decide to just launch a couple Aura Spheres until it breaks my Sash. Behemoth Bash doesn't even do half and I could have survived a critical hit. But after my second Aura Sphere, I don't want to risk losing Gengar before the final fight, so I swap in Mega Metagross, who barely takes any damage at all from the Behemoth Bash and can finish off Zamazenta with a Bullet Punch. This just leaves us with Cramorant and Heatran, so I swap in Infernape on a Flamethrower and take care of Heatran with a close combat. This just leaves Cramorant, which I frankly don't understand why Cynthia would have. All I need to do is poison it and alternate Protect and Thunder Punch until the thing goes down. That does mean I have to take a Gulp Missile, which does end up paralyzing Snorlax, but that doesn't really matter when we've already won the fight. With decent strategy and only a minor fumble versus Phoebe, I'd made it all the way to the champions with a full team of 6 intact. My Mega Evolutions didn't make it this far just to lose, so we're gonna give it all we have to make it to the end. What's unfair about fighting Steven and Wallace is that they get to use a Mega Evolution each. On top of that, they each have a Primal Legendary, which basically means we're fighting 4 Mega Evolutions. If anything, I think I should be the one that gets to Mega Evolve more than one Pokemon, but I suppose I'll have to settle for Mega Metagross. With a Choice Scarf, Infernape is able to outspeed Mega Empoleon O and can immediately take it out with a close combat. I then get some decent damage on Mega Empoleon D before it flip turns out into Metagross. Wallace then sends in Palkia, which immediately transforms into its primal state. Since both of my opponents see KO against Infernape, I swap out into Slowbro and realize I forgot to change its item from Air Balloon. Unfortunately, Palkia hits Slowbro with Spatial Rend instead of Hydro Pump, leaving me in the red before I can hit it with a Zen Headbutt. Now that both my foes see KO against Slowbro, I can just Protect to cause them to whiff, and thus get another free Zen Headbutt. Since both of my opponents will still be targeting Slowbro, I swap out into Tyranitar, who immediately gets hit by an Aura Sphere since Slowbro is probably in range of any random move. But Tyranitar manages to both hold on and dodge a Zen Headbutt, allowing me to take out Palkia. This means Wallace only has one Pokemon left in Suicune, so I immediately swap out into Slowbro, who's gained a ton of health back from Regenerator. After Suicune sets up with Calm Mind, this freshly regained health allows Slowbro to survive a Meteor Mash, which would do just over half with Sandstorm damage, but unfortunately Suicune has leftovers to negate the chip. From there, I protect with Slowbro, dodging a Scald, but for some reason Metagross attacked my Metagross. It doesn't do much damage, but Steven's Metagross does get an attack boost. My second Zen Headbutt gets a crit against Suicune, so I don't have to spend the next turn bullet punching. Slowbro is baiting any random move here, so I don't want to swap something in to accidentally get KO'd from full health. Instead, I let our bulky MVP go down to hit Metagross with a Meteor Mash. Since Wallace is out of Pokemon, this is now officially a 2v1, and I immediately burned Metagross as soon as I send in Gengar. Despite that, it is at +1 attack and has Tough Claw, so it deals a ton of damage, bringing Gengar all the way down into the red. The next turn, I let Gengar go down to a Bullet Punch, and managed to land a second critical hit with my Metagross, taking Steven's Metagross into a range where Burn takes it out at the end of the turn. I send out Infernape as Steven brings in Primal Dialga. I should have swapped Metagross out here since Dialga sees a faster kill than versus Infernape. Instead of doing that, I end up dealing a bit of damage with close combat and then getting outsped and immediately torched by a Fire Blast. Losing Metagross means I'm now down to my last 3 Pokemon and Steven still has 2. Before the inevitable demise of Infernape, I get in one more close combat to take Dialga into the yellow and then get completely disrespected by a resisted Ice Beam. Before I send out my final Pokemon, Snorlax still gets to go for a Body Slam, which both crits and gets a Paralysis. That Paralysis is huge and means we might still be able to pull this off. A knockoff doesn't quite do it, and as long as it doesn't crit, Tyranitar can survive this Flash Cannon. But for whatever reason, Dialga targets Snorlax, perhaps to get revenge for the Paralysis, which allows me to take it out with a Body Slam. This is it. If we can beat Mega Empoleon, we make it through the run. Tyranitar delivers with a critical hit Body Press, but Empoleon immediately negates all of the damage by roosting up into the green. Snorlax unfortunately has nothing better to do than Body Slam, but we do manage to pull off the Paralysis. Tyranitar's next Body Press isn't a crit, and the damage is not looking good. If Empoleon roosts, we could be in trouble, but it ends up getting fully paralyzed. Another combination of pressing and slamming my bodies against this bulky penguin isn't enough to take it out, but instead of roosting, Steven throws away the game by going for Toxic. And so, with one final knockoff, I'd actually done it. I'd beat a Pokemon Emerald Imperium Hardcore Nuzlocke using only Mega Evolutions. Paradoxically, Mega Evolutions tend to be given to Pokemon that are already extremely strong, but even so, I just barely managed to get through the run. So let me know what your favorite Mega Evolution is down in the comments below. I tend to love the ones that make weaker Pokemon a lot better, so my favorite is Mega Beedrill. And hey, if you've been sitting here watching an hour-long video of mine, you should probably subscribe or Snorlax will find you.